Moments ago, the Department of Homeland Security released a joint statement from HHS Secretary Alex Azar, DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, and Attorneys General Jeff Sessions, stating that the Trump administration has completed reunification of the eligible children under the age of 5 who were separated from their parents at the southern border. But the administration said earlier this week that not all of the 103 very young children who were in their custody are able to be reunited. The Wall Street Journal reports that the administration plans to ask a judge to consider giving asylum-seeking parents arrested at the border a choice of agreeing to remain in custody with their children during immigration proceedings or release the children to authorities to be placed with a sponsor. After President Trump addressed the migrant families in crisis by declaring, "Don't come to our country illegally," Vice News relays the story of a 27-year-old man named Jose who requested asylum and did not cross the border illegally, but was still separated from his 3-year-old son in mid-May. He was told the child was being taken to the bathroom. They were reunited this week. The LA Times has reported through records and interviews that many asylum-seeking families who presented themselves legally had been separated. Joining us now, best-selling author Zainab Salbi, and from McAllen, Texas, MSNBC correspondent Mariana Atencio. Mariana, let's start with you. You've spoken to lawyers working with migrant parents who've been separated from their children. What have you heard?
Mika, we came here on the ground to see if these reunifications are actually going to happen, because we saw the administration really struggle to reunify the youngest kids, the 103 under 5. And I just want to run through these numbers quickly with you first. That statement put out this morning by HHS. So out of the 103 kids under 5, they were able to reunify 57 as of 7 a.m. this morning. 46 of the kids, Mika, are not eligible for reunification. That's either because their parents were deported without them. We know of 12 parents that have been deported without their kids, or there were safety concerns regarding the parents, or the kids were brought here with someone who wasn't actually their mom or dad. But this is just the preview, Mika. This paints a picture at the very daunting deadline ahead in 2 weeks' time for this administration to be able to reunify more than 2,000 of the other children. That's why we came here, and we've been reporting in front of the Port Isabel detention facility, where 400 of these mostly migrant mothers separated from their kids are being detained in what one lawyer referred to as a prison. We were not allowed inside, so we talked to this volunteer lawyer, Jody Goodwin. She goes in every other day to try to talk to these mothers. She is our eyes and ears in there. And I asked her, have you seen any movement toward these reunifications happening? She says there is no plan, Mika. She says there is absolutely no knowledge of this happening, and these mothers are getting increasingly distraught because not only are they having to try to get back together with their kids, but they're also trying to process their asylum claims in parallel. This is how she described the heart-wrenching process. Let's listen.
The government puts every obstacle that you can imagine in front of these individual asylum seekers so that they will give up. They want them to take a deport. They tell them, if you give up your asylum claim, we'll reunify you with your child. And that's extortion. Extortion for the body of a child. That's inhumane, it's inconceivable, but that's what our government is doing.
Extortion for the body of a child. It goes back to that Washington Post reporting that you mentioned at the top of our conversation here. And one thing that is sort of bewildering to us, Mika, is why these mothers are being held here in a place that is not fit for children, right? Kids can't be housed there. So if the mothers are in there and the kids are scattered in shelters all over the country, it is hard to reconcile where and when these reunifications are going to happen in a timely manner. Mika?
All right, Mariana Atencio, thank you so much. Zainab, can you explain a little bit the difference between people's the view of America and our values and the rest of the world, and how this policy perhaps takes our value and deteriorates it in terms of who we are?
Values are the exact right question in here. If we are reporting the same news about some other country, all of America, Republican and Democrats, will be horrified at this other country. And now this is happening in America. You know, so let's remember a few things. One is, what does asylum seekers mean? Your life must be in hell. As someone who is an immigrant myself in this country, your life must go through hell before you decide to leave your country, because nothing is better than the stability of your own home. So people who are asking asylum here, they're really risking their safety, their stability, their well-being, their health, and the belief that this is the country that provides freedom, democracy, liberty, respect, all of these things. We are losing these values, regardless of which party, again, we're losing these values. So that's one thing. Second thing, the terminologies that we're using about these kids, catch and release, this is like inhumane terminologies the administration is using, and a lot of us are using. This is like, you know, this is how you do fishing, not how you deal with immigrants or with asylum seekers who have been tortured and risk all these things. And so we are losing values, and these values, we all have to fight for it. This is not about parties, this is about our humanity, and we are losing aspects of that.
All right, let's bring in now Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro of Texas. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We'll get to the NATO summit in just a moment. But first, Congressman, I want to get your thoughts on the separation policy, what we're seeing at the border. We got news today from HHS that 57 of the 103 children under the age of 5 have been reunified. The other 46 do not qualify under the standards set by HHS. Can you help Americans at home who don't have time to study every in and out of this process understand why this takes so long? If you have a child and a parent, why has it been weeks and weeks and weeks that many of these kids have been separated?
Well, it's a fair question, but it's also very hard for me to do that because, like millions of Americans, I'm baffled by that myself. Not only did the Trump administration make a decision to inhumanely separate young children from their mothers and fathers, but at the time that they did it, it's become very clear that there was no plan in place to either keep track of the children and the parents, which we've asked for to receive in Congress and have not gotten, but there was also no plan in place to reunify these folks. And so that's why they basically blown past the judge's deadline, and only about half of these kids have been reunited with their parents. I asked a question in a Foreign Affairs hearing yesterday of the State Department about the State Department's role in all of this, because if you think about it, some of these parents have been deported and they may be sitting in Guatemala or Honduras. Well, HHS doesn't have an outpost in those countries. It's the State Department that's got to help in the reunification process, and I have not gotten an answer to that question yet.
You know, Congressman, it looks to a lot of people watching from the outside that there are too many people standing around helpless, that they can't do anything themselves, and they're counting on people like you in the United States Congress to bang down the door of HHS and DHS and get something done. What pressure can you continue to put on to see that these kids are finally reunited with their families?
I mean, we are basically, and you're right, and I think many members of Congress here feel that weight and that pressure of the nation basically asking us to respond. And so we're trying every angle legislatively, calling, writing letters, doing everything we can, badgering these folks. You've seen people in the streets protesting, marching. I mean, it's basically all hands on deck.
Jeremy.
Congressman, good morning. It's Jeremy Peters. So the cause of abolishing ICE has become elevated as an issue on the left right now. And I think a lot of people, or a lot of politicians, people trying to run for office and join you there in the Democratic caucus in Congress, are saying that. And I don't know that a whole lot of people really understand what that means, to abolish ICE, given that ICE does perform a lot of functions like combating drug trafficking and child pornography that are, I think we could all agree, essential. So is this abolish ICE debate really constructive, and where do you come down on it? Should ICE be abolished?
Well, you know, I think what you're seeing is people's frustration with an organization, an agency, where there's been a lot of abuse, too much corruption, and too much secrecy, like we're seeing now. And so because of that, there's been a reaction to abolish ICE. But you're right, ICE is a large federal agency, and it's not just an enforcement agency. They perform other functions like tracking down human traffickers. So obviously you're not going to get rid of that function. What I do think we need to do is take the enforcement and removal part of what they do and go start over and place it somewhere else. And I also think that we got to continue to have this discussion. I disagree with folks who basically just want to put this discussion in the corner and leave it alone because it may be too politically hot. Nothing ever changes if you avoid topics that are tough to talk about. So I'm glad we're talking about it.
So I want to turn to the president's convulsive diatribe press conference at the NATO summit, full of lies, and then ending with a blithering answer that didn't even make any sense about Africa, peace, and building up our military, but hopefully not being able to use it, whatever that meant. But there were a lot of problems with that press conference, and what we saw was the president doing that on the world stage, but also Congress saying no. But also Republicans saying, no, NATO is important. No, Mr. President, we're going to push back. What can Democrats do to make their Republican counterparts feel more comfortable about standing up to this president when he is clearly out of line, when something is clearly wrong and not right? What give, what negotiating tool, what space can Democrats give Republicans to do this?
Look, I mean, we've tried over and over to work with Republicans, and some of them have worked with us on specific issues, issues where I know that some of them sometimes vehemently disagree with the president. But you got to realize that because we're in a political season and you still have some primaries that are coming up, and Republicans are deathly afraid of President Trump turning the Republican base on them, it makes it very tough, not only on domestic issues, but also on issues of foreign affairs. And I'll tell you, this president, as being about as destructive as you can be in terms of our alliances around the world. And I think what you're going to see, and what we are seeing, is nations start to slowly turn away from the United States and seek allies and partners elsewhere.
All right, Congressman Joaquin Castro, thank you very much. Zainab, I wonder what your takeaway and what stood out to you in the president's press conference.
Well, it's exactly what the congressman said. Nations now are looking, and people in the streets of Turkey and in Germany, all of that, looking at establishing new alliances in here. Some of these alliances may not be in our interests. He's endorsing, he is actually popularizing not only Putin, but Erdogan, who is practically a dictator right now in Turkey. And so his, again, I want to take it back to American values. American values stood for some things. These are being eroded right now and being discredited right now. And when they are being discredited, new alliances are happening. And these alliances are against American interest. We have to remember, NATO was the first group of people who stood up for America right after September 11. NATO was the first group of people, countries who stood up for America in all of its wars, all of its political international debates. And so now we are actually jeopardizing that. So this is what it is. Erdogan, for example, there was a picture yesterday of President Trump working with Erdogan, who is practically a dictator right now. He just took over the government,
that's who he found himself walking with.
And then what he doesn't realize, he's giving credibility to these authoritarian leaders who then legitimize themselves even much more in their own countries and in their own regions. So we are losing far more on the long term than we may think that we are right now.
Zainab, thank you. This president does understand the symbolic nature of his actions.
Yeah, and John, you were talking about truth a few minutes ago, or maybe it was a few hours ago. It's been a long morning. And the president this morning, what he did, came out for 40 minutes and made a grand statement that he'd gone in and shaken up NATO and gotten what he wanted. They're going to commit more money to it. France President Macron comes out right after and says, we did no such thing.
Yeah.
And this is the age in which we live, and it's going to keep rolling this way because he's not going to change.
Yeah.
All right, Zainab's book, forthcoming, is Freedom is an Inside Job, Owning Our Darkness and Our Light to Heal Ourselves and the World. Look forward to that. I got a preview. The president still has hours worth of events today in the UK. Stay with MSNBC for all the fast-moving developments and some big events tomorrow during Morning Joe and Morning Joe First Look.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.